James, 33, and his wife Edith, 31, had been together for 11 years and been married for 3.5 years. They bought a house together on their 3rd wedding anniversary. It was a fixer-upper, and Edith suggested cutting costs. She could get their friend Rob to help out as he was an amateur handyman. James was down to save money on hiring contractors to work on the house, so he agreed to bring Rob on board. Rob was a great guy and super friendly. He and Edith both worked for the same company. James was first introduced to Rob years ago when Edith started inviting him to social events. They all became great friends and even invited Rob and his girlfriend to their wedding, where they met their families. Edith became best friends with Rob's girlfriend, and when Rob proposed to her, she asked Edith to be her maid of honor. There was one event, though, that negatively impacted James and Rob's friendship. Just before Rob's wedding, he had a bachelor party where they rented a beachfront penthouse for the weekend. There was plenty of alcohol and other illicit substances, and of course, strippers. The night was fun. James had a great time and everyone was wasted. He noticed that Rob and one of the girls had gone missing at some point. After a quick search, he found them in the main bedroom. James was shocked to see Rob receiving a blowjob from the stripper. The following day, Rob took James aside and made him promise not to tell his fiancée and not to tell Edith either. James agreed to keep his secret, but he viewed Rob differently from that point on. He thought it was despicable that he would cheat on his fiancée right before the wedding. James regarded loyalty and honesty as non-negotiable aspects of a relationship and cheating as an instant relationship killer. He felt sorry for Rob's future wife and couldn't imagine the heartbreak she would feel if she found out. James was conflicted about keeping his mouth shut for Rob's sake, but they were friends, and he chalked it up to being a one-time thing fueled by alcohol and drugs. Shortly after the bachelor party incident, Rob got married. A few months later, around the same time that James and Edith purchased their home, Rob and his wife announced that they were having a baby. This upset Edith a little because she and James had already been trying to conceive for a year. James told Edith they would continue to try, and maybe it would happen once they moved into their new house. That's when Edith brought Rob in to help fix up the house before the big move. That following weekend, Edith went with Rob to work on the new house while James stayed home, sorted out the packing and prepared everything for the move. On Sunday night, Edith and James were exhausted from the weekend activities, but not exhausted enough to keep them from jumping under the sheets for baby-making time. During intercourse, Edith said something that struck James as a little odd. She had started to say something along the lines of, "I want you to get me off before you finish." She trailed off at the end as if she had realized that it wasn't something she wanted to say to James. He barely registered it then because he was so worked up and his attention was elsewhere, but it floated around in his mind as he drifted off to sleep. Edith's words were at the forefront of his thoughts upon waking the following day. Something about it was bugging him, and he tried to puzzle it out while Edith was in the kitchen making breakfast and getting ready for work. James realized why what she said seemed odd. Throughout their 11-year relationship, James had never once been selfish in bed. In fact, he always made sure to give his wife at least 3 big O's to each one of his. He didn't want a big note himself, but he had always been able to maintain a standing ovation for his wife, even after firing the cannon. Most men can't proceed past the first salute, but James certainly could. Edith knew this very well, to her pleasure, so that's why it was strange for her to ask James to hold off before taking care of her needs first. A dark feeling settled around James. He waited for his wife to leave for work, then grabbed her laptop to see what information he could access. He tried to get into her texts but didn't have access through the laptop. Next, he searched her social media and found one still logged in on the browser. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he combed through every conversation thread, looking for something unusual. Sure enough, he found something. Messages between her and another guy recounting their sex encounters and saying how much they missed being in each other's arms. Messages between Edith and Rob. James didn't pause to think. He immediately sent a screenshot to Edith. In shock and on the verge of a panic attack, he called his brother and told him everything. Someone else tried to call him while he was on the phone, and when he saw it was Edith, he told his brother he had to go and answer his wife's call. Edith swore that nothing physical had happened between her and Rob. It was just flirting and dirty talk, nothing more. James lost his temper, yelled at her over the phone, and then hung up. He needed to clear his head before he spoke to her again. So he took the dogs out for a walk to the park to cool down and process what had just happened. When he returned, Edith was standing in front of the house waiting for him. They went inside to talk. She had been at work with Rob when the text came through, and according to her, Rob's face went as white as a sheet when she showed him the screenshot James had sent. She left work immediately to come home because she was scared that James was leaving her. James demanded answers. He didn't want half-truths. He wanted complete honesty. Edith started crying heavily but agreed to tell the truth. Her affair with Rob started 5 months before James married her. It had been ongoing for 3.5 years. They would have sex after work in the back of Rob's truck or in the car James had bought Edith. Rob would come over while James was out and have sex with Edith in their bed, on the couch, the dining room table, everywhere. Edith had placed a GPS tracker in James's car so she knew exactly when he was on his way home. She even confessed to having to take the Plan B pill on a few separate occasions. They had even done it in the new home James and Edith bought together, going through each and every room to christen the house. This last bit of information absolutely crushed James, and he felt the house was ruined forever before he could even call it a home. He asked if Edith had given Rob oral. He knew it was a dumb question, but when Edith said she had, he lost his shit and went off at his wife in an emotionally charged tirade. After finally calming down, he sat back on the couch in shock. Edith sat beside James and hugged him, crying, apologizing, and begging for forgiveness. When he hugged her back, all his emotions poured out of him like a dam had burst. He felt a devastating, unbearable, torturous heartache that he thought would continue twisting inside of him for the rest of his life. He cried his eyes out and told Edith she had broken him. They held each other and cried together. James was traumatized and barely slept or ate for days. Edith suggested that they go to counseling. They started off with both individual and couples therapy, which lasted about 2 months before James quit and left to go to his parents. He needed space. He thought that would be it. The marriage was over. He almost felt proud for walking away, but after only 3 weeks apart, he caved and returned to Edith. He missed her so much and felt that if he really did leave, it would be horrendous and much more difficult to do than he initially thought. He had 11 years of history with his wife and wanted to reconcile so badly. Edith was beyond happy when James returned and agreed that starting a family would be put on hold while they worked things out. Edith had been anxious to get pregnant as soon as possible, so it was a difficult thing for her to agree to. Her patience dwindled quickly, and within weeks she was pressuring James to try again to have a baby. He told Edith that he didn't want her working with Rob anymore, and that she needed to find another job. She agreed to his terms but put minimal effort into finding another job. So James messaged Rob and threatened to tell his wife about his affair with Edith if he didn't leave his job. Rob responded by telling his wife about the affair himself, and James was surprised that nothing happened as a result. Rob came clean to his wife and just apologized to her and promised he would never cheat on her again. So now James was dealing with both his wife and Rob refusing to leave their jobs, which meant they would still see each other daily at work. This did not sit well with James, and he began rethinking his commitment to reconciliation with Edith, even though they had now fully moved into their new home together. 7 months went by with James never fully recovering from his initial shock. Aside from the work situation, Edith tried her best to improve things between herself and James, but nothing felt the same. James thought about her infidelity constantly and was reminded of it every time he walked into a room in their new house. He couldn't stop imagining Rob fucking his wife right there on the floor, or against the kitchen counter, or on the steps leading upstairs. It was unending torture. One morning when Edith was leaving to go to work, where she would spend the day with Rob, she kissed James as she left. When they kissed, James felt revulsion. In a moment of clarity, he realized he couldn't be with Edith any longer. Not after what she did. Not when she went to work every day to be with him. Their marriage would never be the same, and the relationship could never be salvaged. James was already looking up numbers for divorce lawyers before Edith had even pulled out of the driveway. Within 6 months, he divorced Edith, and the cursed house was up for sale. They moved back in with their families, and Edith kept both dogs. Edith had been in shock when she was served. Apparently, she didn't believe James would ever have gone through with it. She went into a deep depression and attempted to rekindle her relationship with Rob. But Rob's wife put a stop to that immediately. There was a big blowout where she turned up at their workplace and threatened Edith. So much for Edith and her being best friends. Edith and Rob both got written up at work for allowing their personal dramas to flow into the workplace and affect their work. Despite everything, Rob and Edith still refused to find a different job elsewhere. James did his best to recover from losing Edith. She had been such an essential part of him for over a decade, and suddenly that piece was gone. He didn't know what he would do with his life going forward, but he was determined to move on and make it the best life possible. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed this content, please let me know by subscribing and pushing the like button. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll see you in the following video. Take care.